Is she just constantly wearing the reading socks that she knit herself over Christmas this year? The answer is yes. Hi, hello, my name is Allie, and this is my channel where I talk about my knitting and how it's going and how much money it's costing me. And yeah, I'm coming to you from Toronto-ish, not really, that's a lie. I'm coming to you from outside of Toronto, and I've got some updates for you today. So before we dive in, I have to show you my mug today. I just got this in the mail like 2 weeks ago, and I've used literally nothing since. It's from a ceramicist named Courtney Zimmerman in Illinois. And like, look at the handle. Look how cute it is. Look at the gold stars. This is actually like little sculptural dots at the bottom. Like those are 3D. Like it's so cute. It's so cute. And yes, it is my new prized possession in my mug collection. Thank you for asking. So today in my precious new mug, I'm drinking my favorite Sloan Classic Earl Grey tea. But as usual, when setting up to film, I oversteeped it. I've done this I think every single time that I've set up to film now. I'm like, oh, I'll get my tea going while I'm getting the camera set up. And then 15 minutes later, I come and I retrieve my tea. So we're gonna start setting timers. As far as what I'm wearing today, I need to like lean back so you can actually see this. This is my poppy tank, which was sort of like a makeshift scrounged together project situation based off of like not really a pattern. I talked about this in my Everything I've Ever Knit video, so I will link that if you're curious. But I knit this last year between June and August. So because I finished it in August, and I think pretty late in August, I didn't really get much of a chance to wear this last year before it got cold. So this is only the 3rd time that I'm wearing this. This has not gotten a lot of mileage so far, but because it actually only cost me $10, because most of it was made out of scrap yarn and I only had to buy 1 ball to make it happen, that means my cost per wear already is only $3.33. So I can't be too mad about that. And I'm hoping that by the end of this summer, the number of wears will be significantly better. Also, as evident by the fact that I am not wearing like a sweater for the first time on this channel, spring has sprung. My tulips in my garden are making me so happy. I also went to a tulip farm yesterday to get more tulips because they didn't have enough tulips in front of my house. I went there with my friend Brooke, and you just get to wander the field and pick all the individual tulips that you want to take home. So we got to like each make our own bouquets. It was so cute, it was so fun, it made me so happy. Also, before I get into all my knitting project updates, I just want to let you know that in the last video I did mention that I have a giveaway for a set of Xiaogu shorty needles that I found are not for me, but I feel like they're for a lot of other people, and the comments on my last video of people excited to enter to win them really verified that. So at the end of this video, I'm going to be announcing the winner for that giveaway. So do stick around for that if you entered and are curious to find out if you won. Okay, so to jump into whips, I am of course still working on the No Frills cardigan that I mean, looked like it was gonna take my entire life, but you know what? I actually feel like we are nearing the end, which is really exciting because I'm actually gonna get to wear this soon, I think. So this is the No Frills cardigan by Petite Knit. I'm knitting the size extra small. The pattern accommodates up to a 59-inch bust, which is pretty good. We're like almost in the territory of like confidently size inclusive, but I would love to see that pushed a little bit more. Pretty please, Petite Knit, as if you're watching this. So this is a pattern that cost me 45 Danish kroner, or about $9 Canadian, and I'm knitting this out of the Knitting for Olive Merino in the color mustard, and the We Are Knitters Touch Me Mohair, mostly alpaca, as we've discussed, also in the color mustard. Nice and convenient that way. And between the two of these, I bought 10 of the merino and 8 of the mohair, which cost me $230 Canadian for the yarn, which is a lot, but also at least it's a really giant sweater, or about $240 for the whole project if you include the pattern, which works out to about 175 US for reference. Though, as mentioned in my last video, I did kind of a remaining yarn inventory, and I think I'm going to have a lot of this left over. So I think that I actually could have bought materials for this project for a not insignificant amount of money less than what I actually spent. I am gonna have a lot of extra. So in this pattern, you're holding those 2 strands together, and it calls for a size 4mm needle. Now I'm using a 4.5mm because I knit tight always. And this is a duster length top-down raglan cardigan where you actually knit the, not a button band because there aren't buttons, but what do you call it when there aren't buttons? Is it still a button band? Please report back. But you knit this at the same time as you knit the rest of it. You just have this nice ribbed edge, and at the end you don't have to go and pick up 1 gajillion stitches to knit a button in after, which I think is just really nice. I think that particularly on a cardigan this long, like, I hate picking up stitches at the best of times. I think that there's a real risk that if I knit a duster length cardigan and had to pick up for the button band after, there's a real good chance that project would literally never actually get finished. So I do very much appreciate the construction of this pattern in that way. So like I said, this is very much a long-term project. I cast this on January 5th, which means that we're a solid 4 months into this, but I thought this would take me at least 6 months, and we are like rapidly approaching completion. So let me show you the progress. Okay, I've actually got 2 stitch markers on this one right now. So this stitch marker down here, that's where I was the last time that I showed this project on camera. Now, my filming schedule is making this a little bit deceptive here because the last video that went up, I think I filmed it an entire 2 weeks before it went live. And today, if all goes according to plan, I'm filming this video the same day that it goes live, which means that it's actually been 4 weeks since I recorded. So I have not knit all this in the last 2 weeks like the upload schedule is going to make it look. It's actually been 4. So I've gotten from here to here, and then this is marking a separate point that we'll talk about in a minute. So the last time I was talking about this project, I had just pulled it off of the blocking mat. So I decided to do a mid-project block to see if it was going to grow in length, how much it was going to grow, because I do want to make sure that this is kind of like right around ankle length, not too short and definitely not too long because I don't want to be stepping on it. And so I had found that it actually grew way less than I thought it would. It grew like an inch. So I was like, okay, obviously growing in this way from blocking, not a huge concern. I was thinking though that there is still the possibility of it growing vertically just through hanging, just from wear. So in that video I said something about like, should I just like wear it like unfinished for a few days, just like around the house? And then I realized there's like probably a smarter way to do this. What I actually did was I just hung it off of the back of like a bar stool, and I'll pop in a picture. I kind of had a pillow propped up over the top of the chair so that the weight of the shoulder wasn't, you know, resting on this like very thin edge of the chair and putting therefore like a lot of pressure on this like one very specific line. It sort of could like spread out across the pillow in a similar way that it gets spread out over like the entire depth of your shoulder. So I set it up like that and was sort of letting it hang for a few days just to kind of see if it kind of got longer. But I haven't yet actually done the comparative measurement to know, but that is the purpose of the stitch marker. This is where I had gotten to when I did that hang test. And so this last little inch is like what I have knit since then. But so I just wanted to be able to know what is the point that I need to measure to when I'm checking how much it's grown by. So I'll report back in the next video on how much the hanging actually had an impact, because at this moment I don't really know. And I realized like I could measure it on camera right now, but I have the problem where my measurement of what it was before is stored in the camera roll on my phone, which I'm recording on, and I don't want to touch the phone and move it. So we're just gonna do it next time. One thing though that I did think was really interesting when I was doing this hang test is that like I would be across the room and I would look over at it and I could see a very clear line where the project was at the point that I blocked it. Like the difference between the blocked fabric and the fabric that I had knit since blocking, therefore new unblocked fabric, was noticeable. There's a very clear delineation. You can see it in this picture, I think. And I'm not worried about that. I'm confident that that line will block out once the whole thing gets blocked. I don't think you'll be able to tell. But it was just really funny because I didn't really feel like the fabric seemed very different post-blocking. You know, I think it's more obvious in some yarns and in some projects than in others, and this would have been one where I would have told you like I don't know if it did much, but having that like direct side-by-side comparison was like, oh, it really did do something, because these two are very much not the same and you can see it from like 20 feet away. I also have said every single time I've talked about this that this pattern has afterthought pockets, but that I think I'll probably do them as like more of a mid-project thought, blah blah blah, so I'm not stuck doing it at the end. Well, surprise surprise, I still haven't done them, and as you will see in a minute when I try this on, I'm almost done this sweater. So I think that they probably will, after all, be afterthought pockets, despite all my best intentions. But I think that it's just happened that like I've just had like a busy last few weekends, and I think that I really just want to do the pockets on a day where like I just have a day where I can just uninterrupted, like that's my mission for the day, and just get them done and not be worried about trying to fit it in or having to put it down in the middle of things and go do something else. Like I just want to be able to sit down and focus, because I know that there's going to be parts of it that I find tricky or just like unpleasant and like require a lot of focus, and I just don't want to be trying to do all that in and around other stuff, and I just haven't had a good weekend for that in the last few weeks. So it's going to be actual afterthought pockets, I think, is what's happening at this point. Am I going to be a little bit annoyed when I bind off on the whole body and am not done? and now have to do pockets, figure out how to do afterthought pockets because I've never done those. Like, yeah, that's not gonna be my favorite part of the project. It's not, but c'est la vie. Also, one of the reasons that I haven't had a great open weekend to do that lately is a couple weeks ago I was visiting family for my nephew's birthday, and he has always been like sort of curious about my knitting. Like, he asks a lot of questions about it, and he has a very like puzzly, like an engineer kind of brain. He really loves figuring out how things work. Like, he's 9 now, but I think when he was like 7, he like put together like an IKEA coat rack because he just wanted to, and like managed to do it entirely by himself. And so he will often kind of like watch me while I'm knitting and ask questions. And this last time that I was visiting, I was sitting there working on this, and it's just plain stockinette at this point. And I was like, do you want to try it? And he did. So I let him give it a shot. He already knew in theory how to knit because I had told him one time, stab it, strangle it, scoop out its guts, throw it off a cliff. That's like the mnemonic device for the basic steps of a knit stitch. And naturally, being a 9 at the time 8-year-old boy, he thought this was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. He absolutely loved it. And ever since then, I've been able to be like, Chase, how do you knit? And he's like, stab it, strangle it, scoop out its guts, throw it off a cliff. So he already knew it in theory. So it did not take very much to apply it to the real thing, and he had a good time trying out doing a few stitches on it. I'm gonna pop up a video of a few seconds of us doing this because it was great. There was a lot of success, and there was a lot of, oh no, we dropped Timmy. And pause, if you did not have sheep and stitch as a huge part of your knitting learning journey, maybe you're unfamiliar with Timmy, but in the world of sheep and stitch, Timmy is what you call a dropped stitch, because Timmy is the child who has fallen down the well in Lassie and must be rescued, much like the drop stitch has fallen down and now needs to be rescued. So I'm well acquainted with Timmy, Chase is well acquainted with Timmy, and Timmy had some struggles, but Timmy got there in the end.
Stab it, strangle it, scoop its guts out and throw it.
Oh, ah! We lost Timmy down the well. Oh no. Oh
Timmy!
no. Oh, you threw 2 Timmys down the well. Oh my God.
Timmy,
Show me.
Timmy.
Yeah, don't throw anybody down a well this time.
Oh, I think it's too late.
Don't do it.
Why?
Oh, that guy's twisted.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's, oh, don't, no, you can't just throw him down the well. You gotta hold on
Too
tight.
late.
You gotta throw him a lifeline first. Hang on, no.
Right, scoop its guts. Scoop.
Gentle,
scoop
gentle,
its
gentle.
guts out and throw it off cliff. Stab it, strangle it, scoop it. Ah, we lost Timmy. Stab it, strangle it, scoop its guts out and throw it off the cliff.
Yay!
Stab it, strangle it, scoop its guts out and throw it off a cliff.
Good one. Oh yeah, good scooching.
Stab it, strangle, scoop its guts out and throw it off a cliff.
Hey, you're on a roll now.
Strangle, scoop its guts out and throw it off a cliff. End it before it gets bad.
Okay, so now it is time to try this thing on and see how close we are to completion. Oh my God, there's so many just like ends of balls of yarn now because I have not yet woven any of them in, and it's just kind of a disaster. Bear with me. Oh, my head's like slightly out of frame here, not ideal. If you're wondering, is she just constantly wearing the reading socks that she knit herself over Christmas this year? The answer is yes. So that's a lot of cardigan. It's a lot more cardigan than it was the last time I showed it, when at that time it seemed like a lot of cardigan. And yet, like, there's still a lot of cardigan left to knit. How is this possible? I feel like the distance between my knee and the floor keeps growing. Like, I don't know. Do we ever get there? Remember that thing in math class in like 10th grade, I think, where they teach you about the asymptote, where you can get like infinitely closer and closer and closer to it, but you'll never actually reach it? I kind of feel like that's what's happening with the end of this cardigan right now. So someday it will be duster length. So you know what? Maybe I will manage to put in the pockets before I get to the actual bottom of this. Maybe not, time will tell. But that's a lot of cardigan. That's so much cardigan. Look at that. Okay, so my other whip that I have to talk about today is my like dog walking glove project. This is the one where, if you've seen some of my previous episodes, you'll know that I'm sort of like modifying an existing pattern to create like a very weird thing that doesn't actually exist in the world, but that I think would be helpful for walking my dog in cold weather and still being able to like easily dispense treats when like he's doing good stuff. So I'm using as a starting point the Bridge arm warmers. This is a free pattern from Kukiko Inoue and it has one size, so it's very straightforward. So this is what I have so far. And if you're thinking, Allie, those are like two really different sizes, I am aware. And this is because I'm almost done. So here's where we're at. So I knit the long one first. And like I mentioned last time, I was having a hard time as I was knitting. You start from the bottom and then work your way up toward the thumb gusset. And I was having a hard time envisioning, like once I start the thumb gusset, kind of exactly where this is gonna sit. So I thought this was gonna sit on my arm, like more like here. And it actually goes like all the way down here, which I don't mind at all, but I just don't need it. And I thought that I might have an issue with yarn quantity, and I in fact did have an issue with yarn quantity. So what I concluded is that once I am done both of them, I am going to do a little bit of surgery on this one. They are knit bottom up, so I can't just unravel, but I can kind of like put in a lifeline and make a cut and kind of remove the two halves and then kind of pick up the stitches along the fresh edge that I've created and bind off from there. So that's what I'm hoping to do. I'm hoping that it doesn't look too different from the other one. It is done using a tubular cast on, so I'm planning to just match that with a tubular bind off, and hopefully it's fine. Also, worst case scenario, like this will be inside my sleeve. It's not like this is going to be a highly visible area, so I think that's fine. I will talk a bit more about how I did my yarn quantity figuring out to figure out how to do this and make it work with the yarn that I had. But to do that, I first need to show you the rest of these. So part of what I was talking about in previous videos when I was explaining this whole endeavor is that I kind of wanted a pair of gloves that was sort of similar to trigger finger gloves, which I found out via some of you are even a thing, because I was saying my issue is that like I need these two fingers to be dexterous, but like I don't really need these ones, so I might as well have as many fingers warm as I can. And people were like, oh yeah, that's a thing. Gloves were like just these two fingers move separately and the rest is a mitten. And I was like, interesting. Then I was like, what if we combine that idea with sort of like a convertible glove, but not the kind with a flap, because the flap gets stuck, like if I'm reaching for treats in like a pocket, it just gets stuck. I've tried that before, it's not a good time. So I have knit these weird little mini partial mittens. So let me show you. Is this the right hand? Yes, okay. Ta-da! Like, is it weird? Yes. Is it gonna do the job? Yes. So I'm pretty pleased with that. So I'm gonna put the other one on also. I still need to do on this one the thumb I have not done yet. And I'm kind of planning to do that at the same time as I do the surgery on this one. But it should be enough to give the overall effect. Here it is. Here's the concept. It's like weird alien hands. I really like it. I do think that I am going to want to put some snaps in. I know I'd mentioned in the last video that I thought maybe I would do that even just to like have a way to store these together so these little top pieces don't get lost. But I do think that like kind of as I'm like flexing fingers, I do feel it like scooting upward. So I think that just to keep everything in place when I am wearing this little convertible part on there, I think it would be helpful to have, you know, kind of a snap here that attaches to the inside here, just to keep everything in place. And when I don't need those, I can have like normal, not weird alien hand fingerless mitts, and that will be great too. So in terms of my yarn quantities, basically my order of operations here was I knit this one and I had a little tiny bit of yarn left, but I was like, I don't think it's enough to make one of these. So I started one of these, and sure enough, I think somewhere around like here, I ran out of yarn. And my first thought was that as soon as I run out of that first ball of yarn, because I had 2 balls of yarn for this project, so it should just be 1 ball per each glove. I was like, the easiest thing to do is just make sure I'm only using 1 ball for that first one. So as soon as I run out, that's when I need to do surgery. I need to reclaim a little bit of yarn here. But I was like, I just don't super want to do this right now. I was in a mood where I was like, I feel like I could crank out a couple of these and it would be no problem. And I would have a nice afternoon. And if I'm doing this, I will not have a nice afternoon. I'm not going to enjoy this part. I know that. So I was like, okay, instead, what I'm actually going to do is just break into the second ball. But before I do that, I'm going to weigh it, take a note of its measurement, knit the rest of this one, weigh it again. So now I know how much yarn I have stolen from ball 2 in order to finish glove 1. Okay, are we following? which means that from glove number 1, I need to steal an equivalent amount of yarn from the bottom, okay? I think it was 5 grams. I think that was the number that I stole. So to do that, I weighed this whole glove, and then I just measured the length of it, and I just divided the number of grams that it weighed by the number of inches long that it was to find out how many grams it weighs per inch, and therefore how many inches I would have to steal from it to get the number of grams that I wanted. We're following? And like, this is not quite a perfect system because there is a thumb gusset, so it's not like each inch vertically uses exactly the same amount of yarn, but it's so small that I'm like, I feel like that's fine. And then I was thinking I'd also try to like roughly double the amount of grams that I'm taking just to be on the safe side, because it's also possible that these 2 balls of yarn aren't exactly the same size anyway. So if ball number 2 is actually smaller than ball number 1, we could still end up with a discrepancy. So I ended up determining that I was going to take about 2.5 inches off the bottom of this one. So I was just counting, okay, if I do that, how many rows is it before I split for the thumb gusset instead of what it is at the full length? And then I just used those numbers when I was knitting this one. So I just knit this to match what this one will eventually be, assuming that I count appropriately and don't botch any of that, especially in understanding like, is that actually a row or is that just part of the bind off? And did I, it's very possible these will end up like 1 row off, we will see. But again, it's gonna be inside a sleeve, so I really don't think it matters all that much. So the last time that I was talking about these, I was saying that like, hopefully I can get these done quickly and hopefully I'll get to use them a few times before they get put away for the season. And obviously that's not happening now. It is now the beginning of May. It is very much not cold, and I could have gotten these done much sooner, but basically as soon as I said that in my last video, it like promptly became spring. Like there was not really a single day where I would have wished that I had these. And then as a result, like my motivation to work on them quickly really kind of like as soon as I realized that I was gonna have to steal yarn from this one and do all these calculations, I was like, I'm just gonna knit on my cardigan for a couple weeks. So these got shelved a little bit. I pulled them out the other day, and honestly, I did almost all of this in one sitting, like watching a movie. Like this is a really bulky yarn and it's up really fast. So I think I was like around here when the movie started, and by the end of the movie, I was like here and just had a tiny bit left to do. So these have come together very quickly in terms of hours spent, less quickly in terms of the calendar, only because I now have very little motivation. Hi, do you know that I'm talking about gloves for walking you? You wanna say hi? So in terms of the yarn that I'm using for these, this is the Cessia Ulisse. This is the yarn that I mentioned I got on my trip in Venice. This was sort of my souvenir yarn for the trip, if you will. I don't remember exactly how much this one cost, but I think it was roughly in the range of like $40 Canadian or $30 US for the 2 balls together. Hi, Gabby. So it's been really fun knitting these out of that and kind of being able to think about it in reference to that trip, and also like feels very appropriate because that is a trip on which I 100% could have used some fingerless gloves. These would have been very helpful on that trip, in addition to all my other knits that actually were very helpful on that trip. I did a video all about this and how my knits were like the saving grace of that trip. So if you haven't seen that, I will link that up above. And to gauge with this yarn, I'm actually using a 5.5mm needle rather than the 6mm needle recommended in the pattern, which is very novel to me, getting to go down a needle size rather than up. So I picked it back up the other day. I'm now trying to finish these very soon because I feel like we're now at the point where if I don't do this now, these are just gonna fester until like October. And then like we will have a day where it's really cold in October and I'll wish that I had them, and they still won't be done because I will have not looked at them since May. So my goal is to finish them actually very soon this time. If these are not a finished object by the next time I'm recording, please publicly shame me, please. And that's the end of my current whips. So you may notice my Fausta Bralette is still not a whip, despite the fact that it's been mentioned in, this is probably like the 4th video where I've talked about it. I'd done like a swatch, I'd asked questions, I'd been trying to figure out the best way to modify this, to do what I want to do. And I think I've concluded I am still knitting it, to be clear. It is very much still in my plans, but I think I'm just gonna stop pretending that I might cast it on any day now, because I don't even understand what part of me would think that I might do that. Because like I've said this before, like I'm a pretty one-track minded knitter. Like right now I've got the cardigan going and the dog walking gloves, but if the cardigan weren't such like a huge like months and months and months long project, I probably wouldn't be doing that. And the dog walking gloves worked as kind of a nice complement to it because they were quite simple, or at least they were until I did all those calculations. But the appeal of starting them was that they were going to be simple and I'd be able to knock them out really quickly, and it would be this like quick win in the middle of this really big project. But the Fausta Bralette's not going to be that, right? Like it's going to be more intensive than the cardigan, because in addition to making all of these sort of structural modifications, it's also just, it's a 2x2 rib rather than stockinette. It's got all of this shaping already built into the pattern regardless of what I decide to do to mess with it. So there's no world in which this is just going to be like a fun quick reprieve from my sweater. Like it is a main project. Like I think what I'm sort of piecing together here is that it's not that I'm never going to have more than one project going on at a time, but I don't think I'm going to have more than one big project going on at a time. Like I think that for me, it's going to be a main project, and then depending on the main project, that may or may not be complemented by like a mini project on the side, but in no way is a Fausta Bralette a mini project. So I'm just not gonna want to work on those at the same time. I just don't want to. I think that's what I've realized. So I'm gonna stop pretending that I might cast that on any day now, and when I am done the cardigan, I will cast on the Fausta Bralette. That's the plan. So just to keep you posted. And I find this such an interesting thing to like watch other knitting podcasts or just talk to other people who knit. Like I feel like everybody has such a different approach to how many projects they have on the go, and approach doesn't even feel like the right word because that makes it sound like a strategy, like you've like sat down and you've decided it, and it's not that. It's just like a natural inclination, right? It's just what we end up doing without even consciously thinking about what we want to be doing. It's just kind of the way that you gravitate. And I just find this really interesting that I'm like, I cannot fathom having like 5 different sweater projects in project. Like that just sounds like it sounds stressful. It sounds like, are they just all not done for like a year? Like if I'm knitting 5 sweaters in a year, does that mean now I'm just going a whole year without seeing a finished sweater because they're all just being worked on concurrently? Like I think inherently when you're spreading out your effort across more different things, like it takes longer to get to the finish line on each individual one. And so I think this is potentially like, this is like revealing of how driven I am by finish lines, by checking things off, by being able to be like, I did it, look, it's done, isn't it nice? But just the motivation of those like external factors, I think is clearly playing a part in what motivates me to work on what at a given time. So I just think that's really interesting. I think there's also a factor here where like, I've only been knitting for a little over 2 years. So is this something that's gonna change over time, right? I don't really have a lot of large numbers here working in my favor. I haven't worked on enough different projects to really get a sense of like, well, maybe this kind of thing, I would have 2 main projects. Maybe there's a world where I would have 1 main project that is like lace work, so it's complicated. So I also wanna have an equally sized and sort of ambitious and comprehensive project that's just in stockinette, so I can decide, am I in the mood for something basic or in the mood for something more involved? And maybe they're both equally big but happening at the same time. Maybe there's a world where that would happen. I'm just not in that world yet. I don't know, I haven't been there. So I'm just really curious where you sort of would place yourself on the spectrum currently, from like extremely monogamous knitter, single project only, absolutely, to like I have 27 different things on the needles at all times. Like, where are you on that now? And has that always been the case, or has that shifted over time? I kind of wonder if there might be a tendency to shift more toward the end of more projects at a time. The longer you've been knitting, there's just kind of more time and opportunity to like already have been working on something, but then get excited by something else that you see and want to start it. Like I could see how you could move in that direction. But I'm also curious if maybe sometimes people move in the other direction. If there is a sense of like, I'm never getting to enjoy the things that I have knit because it takes so long for them to reach that point of completion. I'm just very curious how this like maps out over time. So let me know if you have thoughts on this. All right, as mentioned earlier, it's time to announce a giveaway winner. So I went through all the comments, verified all the entries, and our lucky winner is this comment. So if this is you, please send me an email at alliemakeseverything@gmail.com within the next 5 days with your mailing address, and I will get that shipped out to you. I'll also reply to your comment with the same instructions. If you entered and didn't win though, do keep an eye on your comment notifications. If I've learned one thing from YouTube giveaways, it's that sometimes they just go unclaimed. Sometimes you don't manage to get in touch with the winner. If this doesn't get claimed, I will just keep drawing names and I will reply to comments saying, you've won the draw, send me an email. And I will just keep doing that until someone claims it. So keep an eye on your comment notifications if you were hoping this is you and you might get a second chance. Okay, and now zooming out, expanding our scope from just knitting to all sorts of other creative pursuits and interests, I've got some fun updates. Okay, to first do a reading update, in the category of finished objects, we have Turtles All the Way Down. So I was talking about this last time because the movie just came out on Max this week, or Crave here in Canada. And I don't reread books a lot, but I've read this like completely sleep deprived and remembered basically nothing about it. And I think like that's not that weird for me, but I think more critically, not only did I not remember it, but I don't think I actually really processed it the first time. Like I don't think it was really even in here. So I was like, okay, John Green is one of my absolute favorite authors. I love his writing so much. And it's not right that I didn't properly read this book just because I was too excited and had to read it the second I got my hands on it, which happened to be at like 1 a.m, right? Like that, it deserved better than that. So I did reread it. So this is a book by John Green that it's fiction. I was gonna say, like, is it YA? Like it's sort of YA, but it very much breaks some like rules of YA. I think that John is just kind of one of those authors who is now big enough that he is kind of allowed to like float outside of the lines and like blur the lines of genre. But it is about a teenage girl, whether or not it's actually YA, who has OCD, and specifically like a sort of like germophobic OCD. And John Green has talked about the fact that he has OCD. And so a big part of what he was trying to do with this book is trying to capture that feeling and put it on the page in a way that other people can actually understand how it feels, at least for him, to have this kind of thought spiral. So I did reread it, and shock of all shocks, I loved it. It's great. John's writing is great. Who would have thought? Favorite author wrote a good book, right? So I have to say I definitely enjoyed rereading the book more than I enjoyed the movie, but also like show me a book that is not better than its movie. Actually, that's a whole topic. I do think that it's hard to do a really good book to film adaptation. I think that they have a tendency to lean very cheesy because a lot of things that work really well on the page where you can sort of imagine it in like the least cringy way, or not even that, but just like, I think that not seeing it with your actual eyeballs gives you an additional level of suspension of disbelief in terms of cheesiness that is much harder to access when you're actually seeing it in front of you in a movie. So I think that for that reason alone, it's hard for a movie to work as well as its book. And then of course you have issues of having to often really condense things because time is an issue. This is where also like I am very much not a purist about book to movie adaptations. I would rather you adjust the story to stay true to the like overall tone. Like to me, it's very much like the whole thing of like, you should be following the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. To me, it's that. Like if you need to change the plot in order to work better in the movie in a way that actually feels the most true to what the book was getting at, if in a different way, I think that that's better. So I'm very much not opposed to like significant adaptation changes, but I am curious to know if you have a movie that you think is better than the book, because I would submit to the category The Martian. I saw the movie first and I was like, oh, I actually really love this movie, and it's very much not like the kind of movie that I would normally just like sign up to watch. And I loved it so much that I was like, I should read this book. And then I was like, I feel like I could have just watched the movie again. I would have been happier. So all that to say, I did have a good time watching the movie. It was what I was watching while I was knitting that almost entire second glove. But the book's just where it's at. If you love the book, I would for sure say check out the movie. I think it's just fun to see something that you already love in a new form. And I do think that the movie did a really good job of conveying like the parts of the book that you would think would be really hard to convey in a movie, specifically in the way that her thought spirals kind of like impede on her life. So it's all very, very internal. And that actually comes through in the movie so well. And it's really impressive. So I do think that it's definitely worth a watch. Did I love it as much as the book? No, but like, was I ever going to? Okay, moving on to our reading whips. This is out of left field for me. So this is Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. And in absolutely no world would I have ever like wandered into a bookstore and been like, I should pick that up. But someone was talking to me about Anthony Bourdain and I didn't really know very much about him. Yes? Okay, thanks. So in absolutely no world would I have ever wandered into a bookstore and been like, oh, I should read that. I hate cooking. I do not watch any TV chef people. This is just so not a world that I am a part of. But so I was recommended like an essay that he wrote years and years ago that I guess kind of like kickstarted his like culinary writing career. And I loved it. I was like, I do not care about cooking at all. But his voice is just so clear. Like I kind of want to compare it to like The Catcher in the Rye, which is like one of my favorite books, despite how like deeply problematic the main character is, because the voice just like, I remember reading that, I think I was like 15, 16, like, you know, the age you're supposed to be when you first read The Catcher in the Rye. And I remember reading it and thinking like, I have never read a character who sounded so real. Like the dialogue felt so real, the like internal monologue felt so real. I was like, I feel like there's like an actual person inside of this book in a way that I've never read before. And like I love J.D. Salinger's writing for that so much. And like obviously Anthony Bourdain was a real person, so it's not like the same thing. But he just has like such a crystal clear voice that I'm like, I've literally never even seen him on TV for 5 seconds, but I still feel like I can hear him talking in my head, and that's so fun. So I'm not super far in this yet. I'm only like 50 pages in, but I'm really enjoying it despite the fact that I do not care about cooking at all. And this is also a fun edition because this was put out quite a while after the first edition came out. So it's actually updated inside with all of this like marginalia where like he had gone back through and written his like up-to-date thoughts on some of the things that he'd written all of these years ago when he first wrote this book. And I just really like that idea. I think it's so cool. So that is my current reading whip. And then as per usual, did I have any yarn acquisitions? No. Do I have book acquisitions? Yes. So this is a pre-order that arrived. I ordered Beyond Getting By Holly Tratham, which is published by The Financial Diet, which I have been following for years and years and years. So if you're also in like the John Green world, you will know that The Financial Diet is like affiliated with the Vlogbrothers. They initially like gave them a grant to kickstart their YouTube channel, whatever. Anyway, I've been following The Financial Diet for years. If you're unfamiliar, it's like a personal finance channel that is like actually self-aware of the fact that we're existing in like a capitalist society that is like not really designed for everyone to be doing super duper well, and that your financial situation is not purely a result of your own personal moral failings, the way that a lot of personal finance content is. It's also very much targeted to like millennial women specifically. Also very different from a lot of personal finance content, and especially very different from what there was out there at the time that they started. I think there's a lot more of that now, and now even for like Gen Z women. But The Financial Diet was really, I think, kind of early to that game, and so I've been following them for a long time, and this is the second book that they have put out. And as kind of like a personal finance nerd, as you're probably not surprised about, given the fact that I'm constantly calculating cost per wear and telling you how much the yarn costs and this and that, I'm excited to get into this one soon. Okay, so that's the end of the reading updates. Moving into writing updates, last time I was talking about having just sent out some queries for the manuscript that I have written, edited again, blah, blah, blah. So if you missed me talking about this before and you're not familiar, querying is a process where you're basically contacting literary agents, being like, here's kind of the gist of my book, here's the first 5-10 pages, whatever the agent asks for. Let me know if you're interested in reading more. And the hope is that you will find an agent who really falls in love with your book and decides they want to sign you on as their client. And then they are the ones who shop your book around to publishers to try to get it actually published. So I finally sent out a batch of queries into the world. And like I said, it's a very full of waiting kind of process. Weeks, months, you just get to sit around and wait to get an email being like, thanks, but no thanks. There's just a lot of that. And I did get a couple of those. And then I got a response being like, oh, this sounds maybe interesting. Could you please send the full manuscript for me to read? Now, I would very much like to state, the odds of getting a full request are not great. The odds of actually getting an offer of representation from an agent off of that full request, even worse. So I am just happy my queries aren't just entirely going off into a void of people who do not care about them whatsoever. I am putting like 0.01% hope on it going any further than this whatsoever. I am just happy that someone liked the sound of the query and the first 10 pages enough to want to read a little bit more. I'm very excited about that. I'm going to continue to ride that feeling as the inevitable dozens of additional rejections come in over time. Also, when I first started kind of doing this segment in my videos, I was thinking like, oh, there's gonna be like so many different things that I'll talk about. And it's just happened that in the few months since I've been doing this channel, I just haven't been doing a lot of creative things outside of reading and writing. So a lot of the things that I thought that I would talk about just haven't come up yet for me to talk about. But I think that in my next video, I'm going to have some more fun updates on this front, because next weekend, my nephew is coming to stay with me. And I might have used this as an excuse to spend money on art supplies, because he loves a good art project. And I was like, I think he would really have a fun time doing paper marbling, which, if you don't know what that is, this is sort of what marbled paper looks like. And the process is really fun. So I'm hoping that the next time I'm recording, I can show you some of our masterpieces and kind of explain a bit about the process, because it's so much fun. And it's kind of one of those things where it looks cool kind of no matter how it turns out. Like, it's hard to botch paper marbling. Like, it might not look the way you intended for it to look, but it's still gonna look cool. So it's very like satisfying in that way. So I haven't done it in a super long time. I think it's gonna be really fun. And I'm also currently thinking that if I get big enough pieces of paper to do it on, I can also then use some of my paper marbling pieces as background pages for my scrapbook, because scrapbooking is another thing that I love to do and just haven't done in the last few months. So hopefully soon I can show you some fun scrapbooking things using marbled paper also, which just sounds super fun. All right, so that's everything I've got to talk to you about today. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out, talking about knitting, non-knitting. Let me know if you have thoughts on anything that I've talked about in this video. I would love to hear from you. And I hope that if you'd like to be here next time, you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.